You looking for sheer, great linebacking?
Hey, baby, let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs and have some fun.
Some of the hardest men in show business.
You can't hurt this. I'm a machine, jerk.
You can't get no meaner than them guys.
Hey, Shula, you better hope I never get back in there. I'm gonna kick your ass.
You work his tail off.
4 quarters out, 4 quarters. Let's go. Number 3, bud, number 3.
First round selection.
In the NFL, offense may sell tickets, but defense wins championships.
Races to the goal line. No. Incomplete.
Defense wins championships.
And at the heart of a defense is its linebacking corps.
A linebacker is the type of a kid who loves the hit. A person who probably, you take his heart out from here and you put it in his belly and you call it guts. They're the destroyers, the demolishers. The offense builds something up and then the linebackers just destroy it.
Afraid, are you?
Our criteria for the greatest linebacking corps of all time includes Pro Bowls, Super Bowls, the effect of surrounding talent, and the unit not as individuals, but as a whole.
Well, I think it's a difficult thing to judge because you can't do it really quantitatively because every defense is structured differently.
That's his right.
You got to strip away the front four in front of them.
You got to get really good athletes that are smart and all complement each other.
You take any other the group, and I would take them as a GM.
The number 10 linebacking corps of all time, the 2000 Ravens.
98, they're playing the San Diego Chargers. And Eric Metcalf catches a pass over the middle. But Eric's in full stride. So it's a 60-yard race to the end zone. And there's no one else in the picture but Eric and Ray. They get to the 30-yard line, and Ray hits the extra gear. Just takes him down at the 20. And that's when I knew that group was going to be special.
Ray Lewis was Baltimore's Seminole defender, but Jamie Sharper and a former Seminole helped the Ravens take flight in 2000.
Peter was the consummate pass rusher.
Boulware hits them, the ball's loose, fumble.
For a few years, Peter Boulware was probably as big a nightmare for any offensive tackle or tight end in this league as anybody.
Everybody on that defense got overshadowed by Ray, and Peter was the sack specialist. Jamie made big plays, but no one knew about it.
Ravens pick it up, touchdown, Jamie Sharper.
Jamie came in, and he became like the caddy. But when the chips were down, when we needed a play to be made in that championship game against Oakland, Jamie made that play.
Throw down the middle, it's picked off. That's it, Jamie Sharper. The fat lady can sing now.
But it was Ray Lewis who most often left offenses singing the blues.
You can't hurt this. I'm a machine, jerk.
It was Ray's team.
Follow my lead, and I promise I'll get you there. When that whistle blows, we on this hell today. It was passion with Ray.
We want to be the best at what we're trying to get done. We got to set this team out.
I mean, Ray felt like he should make every tackle, every play.
When Ray hit you, he destroyed you.
And we were playing against them one time, I believe it was a Sunday night game, and Bam Morris caught a screen pass out on the flat and just laid him out. Just laid him out. And it just gave him a renewed sense of confidence at defense. And that's what great linebackers bring.
In 2000, Lewis earned the NFL's defensive MVP with a season for the ages.
I don't know if there'll be an inside linebacker to ever have a year like Ray Lewis had that year. He was just a Hoover vacuum cleaner that year.
Ray was the total package. Just a menacing force.
And Ray Lewis sealed the deal for the Ravens.
He was the best football player in the National Football League in 2000, without question.
All right, D, come on now, take it over.
In 2000, our number 10 linebacking corps helped Baltimore set the record for fewest points allowed in a 16-game season, on their way to winning Super Bowl 35.
There's no other defense I've ever seen in my lifetime that can compare to this one.
They cannot throw them. They can't even move the ball.
But Lewis and the backers had plenty of help from the defensive line.
They had two huge tackles inside in Sam Adams and Tony Siragusa, who very often took 4 offensive linemen to block those 2 players.
They had one job, and they let me, Peter, and Jamie run all day long.
I mean, all of those guys could run. They were big. They were athletic. You take all 3 of those guys, you put them together, that's a very special unit. Should be in the top 5.
Well, if it's any consolation, Lewis certainly has the top spot for pregame introductions locked up.
How do I follow that?
Coming up, which band of renegades broke into our list?
They were always going to spit in your face and start a fight. You needed to match their intensity level.
A linebacking corps' legacy is often born or broken on pro football's biggest stage.
Welcome to the biggest show in sports.
Buffalo's Cornelius Bennett, Shane Conlon, and Darryl Talley combined for 10 Pro Bowls, but couldn't pay the bill at the big dance. Brian Urlacher and Lance Briggs played in back-to-back Pro Bowls, but stumbled in Super Bowl 41.
Chicago Bears just does not get it done.
Andre Tippett and New England's linebacking corps helped get the Patriots to Super Bowl 20 in New Orleans, but failed to finish what they started, as did our next group in Super Bowl 12.
The number 9 linebacking corps of all time, the Orange Crush.
The Orange Crush defense really was about the linebackers.
The Broncos of the late 70s featured Tom Jackson, Bob Swinson, Randy Gradishar, and Joe Rizzo in a 3-4 defense ahead of its time.
At that point, we were the only team in the NFL running that defense.
Offenses did not know how to attack us.
Pass, one-hand attempt, incomplete, intercepted.
After you played Denver, you wouldn't be sore physically. You'd be sore mentally.
We'll change it up on them so they don't get used to anything.
Among the linebackers, it was the quietest Bronco who made the loudest impact.
Randy Gradishar was your classic off the front of the Wheaties box All-American boy. Comes from a town called Champion, Ohio, and was very smart.
When they tighten down close, that means they're going to usually pass.
He was kind of our hero guy. He was a 10-year linebacker, never missed a game.
We get all the game goals.
Led our team in tackles every year.
Wherever the ball was, I'll guarantee you that's where Randy was. Wasn't a Butkus kind of guy.
And it's not about one-on-one, I'm going to knock your block off. That's my goal. My goal is to get to the ball.
Fumble! Broncos have the ball!
To me, he was just the epitome of a great linebacker. I think it is an absolute tragedy that he is not in the Football Hall of Fame.
A former Louisville Cardinal did all the chirping on our number 9 corps.
Jackson was the emotional vocal leader.
We got to stop the first down run. Tighten up, D. Don't jump offside.
He was our top blitzer. Plus, he was able to play pass defense very well because he was the fastest of the 4 linebackers.
When I saw Tom in his younger days, he reminded me of a cat. He was so quick. I'd never seen anybody as quick as Tom. And he made a lot of big plays.
Intercepted! Tom Jackson will return it for a touchdown!
2 undrafted free agents rounded out our number 9 linebacking corps, Joe Rizzo and Bob Swinson.
Swinson was real tall, real lanky, great agility, great mobility.
Great quickness, probably the quickest of the 4 linebackers.
Joe Rizzo was just kind of a mean, ornery type of guy that you'd want to go into a bar with, and if anything happened, you'd want him protecting your backside. That was Rizzo.
In 1977, the Broncos emerged from preseason obscurity to produce the AFC's best record at 12-2, and Bronco Mania took hold of Mile High.
It was unbelievable. When you went into Mile High Stadium, it was almost like going to a college game. The Broncos had never had a winning season.
But the Broncos would need to beat some of the best teams in NFL history to reach Super Bowl 12.
I just don't think that the media really felt they were for real.
Only one of them could get to the Super Bowl out of the AFC. It's like watching 6 18-wheelers coming down the highway to a 1-lane bridge.
But our number 9 corps made Denver's dream a reality.
Intercepted Jackson! His second interception of the day! Throws under pressure. Intercepted! Swinson! The miracle has happened! The Broncos are going to the Super Bowl!
was a monumental moment in Bronco history.
Denver didn't get the ring, but they did get our number 9 spot.
I think it's a very underrated group of linebackers because they never did win a Super Bowl.
It's a special group in the National Football League history.
The number 8 linebacking corps of all time, the Raiders of the early 80s.
The defense, to me, was huge for the Raiders, and all you need to do is look at the Super Bowl win over the Washington Redskins.
In 1983, Matt Millen, Ted Hendricks, and Rod Martin helped the Raiders claim their second Super Bowl title in 4 years by shutting down the highest-scoring offense in NFL history.
The Raiders linebackers in that era might have been overlooked because we tended to think of the Raiders as an offensive team. But their defense was huge.
Just win, baby.
The Raiders have long relished their role as NFL bad boys.
Here come all the Raiders. Holy Toledo.
You know, they were always going to spit in your face and start a fight. And they're very physical team, particularly against the run.
And in 1980, our number 8 linebacking corps added a hungry Nittany Lion.
Matt Millen was the physical leader inside.
We'd watch him when he'd roll off a pile, hit a guy with an elbow, and we thought he was hilarious.
And Matt on every tackle saying, if I could beat you up longer, I'd stay here.
Simple game. You find the ball, and you drill him.
While Millen plugged the middle, Rod Martin pounced from the edges.
Martin reminded me a lot of Jack Ham in terms of the great speed.
Throws is picked off, intercepted by the Raiders, Rod Martin.
He was actually known on the team as having this incredible vice-like grip.
If he got his hands on you, it was over.
Millen and Martin fit traditional roles, but there was nothing traditional about Ted Hendricks.
His first day at practice, he rode a horse out to the middle of the field. On the horse, he had on his Oakland Raider practice uniform, and he was wearing a German helmet with number 83 on the side of it. And we all just kind of looked at each other and said, fits right in.
Ted Hendricks was kind of a freak because Ted Hendricks was about 6'7" or 6'8". He could really do a little bit of everything,
including blocking kicks, which he did 25 times.
It's blocked in the middle.
An unofficial NFL record. But the Mad Stork was best known for his uncanny ability to rush the passer.
He understood attacking protections, the adjustments, personnel, and he'd adjust on the fly. He would extend his arms and he wouldn't put moves on you. All of a sudden, he was grabbing the quarterback.
It was a linebacker corps that really worked well together because of a disparate set of physical attributes.
And those attributes were never more evident than on the big stage.
Throws one, intercepted. Rod Martin, picked off. Rod Martin, picked off. Rod Martin, the third time today.
Big stage brilliance was enough to get the Raiders our number 8 spot.
This was our finest hour. This was the finest hour in the history of the Oakland Raiders.
Coming up, which linebacking crew had quarterbacks in the crosshairs?
His worst nightmare.
Many linebacking corps have lived and died by the blitz.
The pain train is coming.
Derek Thomas tallied 20 sacks in 1990.
Oh, what a play!
In 1996, Lamar Lathan and Kevin Green rushed Carolina to the NFC Championship game.
Too much for him today, King. Little too much for him today.
In 2005, the backers totaled 30 of Pittsburgh's 47 sacks on their way to winning Super Bowl 40. But they aren't the Pittsburgh unit that's next on our list.
The number 7 linebacking corps of all time, the Steelers of the mid-90s.
I think the second Pittsburgh set of linebackers was probably better than the 70s version because you had Mean Joe Green and L.C. Greenwood. You had all that pressure and all that heat. Well, in this case, the heat was coming from Lloyd and Green from the outside.
In the mid-90s, Greg Lloyd, Kevin Green, Chad Brown, and LaVon Kirkland turned Pittsburgh into Blitzburgh.
When you think about pressure, that's exactly what they did.
You get where you feel like you can rush the quarterback. You understand? Rush the quarterback.
Do not let that damn quarterback out of there.
They had an attitude, that Pittsburgh attitude that Lambert, Ham, and Russell set back in the 70s.
That'll cool your ass off.
They were just the 90s version of it.
That's Steeler defense. That's Steeler defense.
Nobody on our number 7 linebacking core brought more attitude than Greg Lloyd.
Walk your ass out here and get embarrassed.
Greg Lloyd was not a particularly big man, but I think Greg Lloyd's one of the hardest hitters I've ever seen.
I don't feel sorry for you. Line up and play football.
Greg Lloyd just liked to hurt people.
You better slide. I'm gonna bust his ass.
That guy across from me, he has to raise his level of play or he's gonna get his ass kicked all day.
I think Greg Lloyd may be one of the best football players I've ever seen.
Back, here's Blake. Lloyd gets to him. Loose football. Steelers have it. What a play by Greg Lloyd.
In 1993, Pittsburgh found him a partner.
Dog rush one, man. Heel on the flip.
Kevin Green and he just fed off each other.
They can't beat us. They can't beat us, all right?
You had pure emotion between Kevin Green and Greg Lloyd.
Not today, baby.
Kevin is crazy like a fox.
I'm with you, baby. I'm with you.
If you were going into a troubled situation, I think you'd want to take Kevin along with you.
Come on! Let's break it!
There was mayhem on the edges and a monster in the middle.
The one that surprises people is Levon. Because Levon, he was rather robust.
That 273-pound monster middle linebacker who runs like a gazelle.
Kirkland was like a defensive tackle playing at the Mike linebacker. You know, I remember trying to chase that guy down, and he was bigger than I was.
The name of this damn game is respect. Let's line up and let's do it.
The backers carried Pittsburgh to 3 AFC title games in 4 years, and only Neil O'Donnell could keep them from a ring.
O'Donnell threw it right to him. There was no receiver out there.
As these guys grew not only into their position, but into each other, they were a formidable force. They were tough to deal with.
The number 6 linebacking core of all time, Lombardi's Packers.
Back in the 1960s, everything that you did defensively was built on physicality and stopping the run. Toughness was at a premium.
And no core of linebackers was tougher than our number 6 group, Leroy Caffey, Dave Robinson, and Ray Nitschke.
Ray Nitschke was the most frightening person on game day that I've ever seen. I mean, his face, he looked like, Freddy Krueger.
When he walked on that field, he'd start metamorphosizing. You see him changing. He'd start turning this hitting machine, this monster.
Coming in there was Nitschke.
You didn't take on Ray Nitschke if you didn't have to. That might be your last thing you wanted to do.
Contrary to his mythic figure, Nitschke made just 1 Pro Bowl, the same number as Leroy Caffey and 2 fewer than Dave Robinson.
I'm not sure Nitschke was the greatest that ever played. I don't know that he wasn't. But for the Packers, he set the standard.
I mean, Nitschke was the figurehead. He was the emotional leader on the field.
Let's get a block in there. Put him down.
He was the guy they all looked up to.
Let's go. Get out there. Run out there.
And he was a frightening person because of his passion and his intensity.
The former 3rd-round pick embodied Lombardi's ideal linebacker.
Pursuit is a man's responsibility. Pursuit is dedication. Pursuit is persistence. It's getting to the ball carrier on the shortest course, taking the proper angle, and when you get there in an angry mood.
Dave Robinson is maybe one of the most underappreciated linebackers that ever played a game.
I go in every ball game figuring we're going to have a shutout.
I'm not sure anybody's ever been better than Dave Robinson. I can't imagine why he's not in the Hall of Fame.
Playing with you got to be, the finest outside linebacker in football.
Dave was a great athlete, big for that year.
Let's take it to him now. Come on, let's take it to him.
But what made Dave Robinson a great linebacker was a combination of his instincts as a player.
Dave Robinson to the 15-40.
He had a great feeling for what the offense was going to do at a given time, and yet he was a gambler, as evidenced by his play in the '66 championship game.
If the Cowboys go in here, we're going into overtime.
Meredith is rolling out. It's Dave Robinson that instinctively goes against all that Lombardi had instructed him to play back. Instead, charges.
He's going to be nailed.
But that play was symbolic of Robinson's instincts to do the right thing at the right time.
The game was different then.
Ray Nitschke did not have to play against 3 and 4 wide receiver sets.
But 5 world championships
Green Bay Packers are going to be
And 2 Super Bowl wins qualifies Green Bay for our number 6 spot. Coming up, which middle linebacker remade the position?
Somebody knock him out for me, will you? Cool your ass off.
Recapping our top 10 linebacking corps of all time. Number 10, Ray Lewis and the Ravens soar in 2000.
I'm a machine, John.
Number 9, a different breed of 3-4 defense flourishes in Denver. Number 8, the silver and black takes gold 2 times in 4 years.
Let's keep dominating.
Number 7, 4 backers turn Pittsburgh into Blitzburg.
I don't feel sorry for you. Line up and play football.
Number 6, Nitschke unleashes terror on the frozen tundra. The number 5 linebacking corps of all time, the 85 Bears.
I think 85 is the best set of linebackers I've ever seen. And I'm talking about Wilbur Marshall, I'm talking about Otis Wilson, Mike Singletary. Those 3 guys took no prisoners.
In Chicago's blitz-happy 46 defense, our number 5 linebacking corps spent most of its time in opposing backfields.
Otis and Wilbur were basically blitz guys. Otis was more powerful. Wilbur was very, very explosive. Any one of them could change a ball game. Certainly Wilbur Marshall.
It's picked up on the play by the Bears.
Wilbur was the guy that I would call the assassin. Mean, was nasty, in a bad mood. He didn't like anybody.
You know, he played with that right mixture of intelligence and anger.
I've seen Wilbur hit some quarterbacks that were just unmerciful.
I still see the hit he made on Joe Ferguson from Detroit. I'd never seen like it. I thought he killed him. You know, he knocked Joe into another century.
Otis's personality was to seek and destroy. When he looked at the enemy, Otis was going to take him out. Otis was so strong in terms of his upper body strength that you could almost put him down in the 3-point and Otis could go make a play. They were so relentless, so ferocious.
You're another quarterback, we coming.
It's just their attitude.
But the man in the middle was the Midway's biggest monster.
Lift him up. If it's flop over there and Sterling Sharp is on the inside guy, you got to be on it. Hey, baby, we're going to be here all day.
Mike was a north-south kind of guy.
I like this kind of party.
It's a little bit easier to play middle linebacker. Your typical middle linebacker plays from tackle to tackle. Singletary's lane responsibilities were basically guard to guard.
Handoff, Dickerson, hit by Singletary, stacked up.
Singletary got there with a lot of thunder.
Hey, man, this young quarterback, man, somebody knock him out for me, will you?
The Bears recorded an NFL record 72 sacks in 1984. They set the record for fewest points allowed in 1986.
Goes our lock. Hey, Wilbur Marshall.
But it's our number 5 linebacking corps' 85 campaign that's etched in history.
I'll tell you what, this defense has been incredible. To knock your socks off just to watch it. Total decimation to the AFC champion New England Patriots.
So why are the Bears only number 5 on our list?
Mike couldn't play coverage. We didn't ask him to play coverage. He knew he couldn't play coverage. Wilbur, again, he wasn't a great man to man cover, believe me. Miami proved that.
Make the turn.
The bottom line in anything you do is can you execute? And these people gave us the ability to execute in that defense.
Despite their shortcomings, there's only 4 groups in NFL history higher on our list.
The number 4 linebacking corps of all time, Hank Stram's Chiefs.
As a group, man, we was unbelievably awesome.
And Bobby Bell, Willie Lanier, and Jim Lynch. What made them great was the combined will to compete.
It was a defense that was draped around the linebacker. We enjoyed an awful lot of success. It wasn't a cocky thing, but I do feel that we felt at that time we were the best linebacking corps that had played the game. And we were out to prove that.
But before they could take on the league, our number 4 linebacking corps had to take on each other.
William and I came in the same year. He and I competed for the middle linebacker job. Very early in that contest, I said to myself, well, they're going to have a new middle linebacker, and it's not going to be me.
On the double zone, how you want to handle it offset on the double zone?
I was able to go to the outside and play that position probably better than I ever would have played the middle linebacker position.
Lynch was sort of like a Jack Ham. Smart, cerebral, never out of position, very dependable.
I don't think Jim got the credit he's due to him.
While Lynch flourished outside,
They got a slot double wing!
Lanier was changing the game inside.
He was the first linebacker that I ever interviewed that talked about geometry and angles of pursuit. He was a very cerebral, very intelligent middle linebacker.
But it was another use of his head for which the Hall of Famer was best known.
He used to wear that old Ohio State-looking helmet, had the big ridge that ran down the middle of it, and he would hit you.
I call him a quiet guy, but he sneak up on you and hit you with a hammer.
He laid down. Hey,
I mean, I'll be sitting over there, he hit somebody, I'll be jumping too.
He was the best middle linebacker in the league. And Bobby Bell was probably the best outside linebacker.
9-time Pro Bowler Bobby Bell carved out his own historic niche on our number 4 linebacking core.
Many people still believe to this day that Bobby Bell may be the best all-around linebacker to ever play the game.
What pressure put on by Bobby Bell?
Bobby Bell had all the physical attributes necessary to play almost any position.
Bobby Bell with a touchdown.
He was a quarterback in high school, was probably the greatest long snapper in the history of the game. Hank Stram put Bobby Bell on his hands team, and more than once, Bobby Bell ran it back for a touchdown.
He was a complete linebacker.
In Super Bowl IV, our number 4 linebacking core completely dismantled Minnesota.
Cap rows down the middle. That's it. Chiefs are the world champions of professional football.
How many NFL linebacking corps have 2 Hall of Famers? 2 guys who are arguably the top 3, 4 at their position in the history of the game.
That was as fine a set of linebackers as ever played the game.
Coming up, an army of one invades the NFL.
His worst nightmare.
A single sensational player can sometimes carry a linebacking core. Dick Butkus was the original inside intimidator, reaching 8 Pro Bowls in 9 years despite just 2 winning seasons.
Oh, man.
Fellow tough guy Chuck Bednarik led the Birds to an NFL title in 1960. That same year, Detroit's Joe Schmidt was the NFL's co-MVP.
Joe Schmidt picks it up at the 14.
He was the only linebacker to achieve that honor until the apple of New York's eye.
The number 3 linebacking core of all time, Parcells Giants.
When you look at LT, you can almost stop there. And to think that Harry Carson and Carl Banks will be on that same defense is kind of frightening.
Taylor, Banks, Carson, and Gary Reason simply overwhelmed opposition in the mid-'80s.
Hey, we're a bunch of bad son of that's play some ball.
That was the toughest opponent I played against. Because they beat the living daylights out.
We had a run in '86 where no starting quarterback finished the game.
When you played the Giants, you left that football game. You were on your way to an ice tub. I mean, they've knocked out my front teeth. The worst injury I've ever suffered, besides my broken leg, which was another one, was a hip pointer that I got. All courtesy of the Giants.
Hey, baby, let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs and have some fun.
No defender ever changed the game quite like the 1986 NFL MVP.
Lawrence Taylor is the greatest defensive football player I have ever seen. There was a writer who said, why all the fuss? He only had 11 interceptions.
Intercepted! There goes Taylor!
Let me tell you something. If he dropped into coverage, you breathed a sigh of relief.
He's going to go in!
You have to give Bill Parcells and the Giants a ton of credit for understanding what he was and how he could dictate to an offense. No back could block Lawrence Taylor.
When you see the angle stance of the left tackle, that was invented because of Lawrence Taylor.
son. Y'all got to do better than this.
He came off that edge, and he came off that edge with an attitude.
Bonafide animal. LT hated everybody.
Hey, Steelers, you better hope I never get back in there. I will kick your ass.
He tried to tear your head off when he got to you.
LT left offenses with nowhere to attack our number 3 linebacking core.
We wanted to run at Lawrence.
Homeboy, we can't play that stuff over here. Y'all gonna have to go to the other side.
It was better to go at him than away from him because he'd run everything down. But then you had to deal with Harry coming up the middle.
What's the first thing you hear? Gotta stop the run. We gotta stop the run this week. Well, to me, Harry Carson was the best run-stopping linebacker of his generation.
Let's not give them any confidence.
Carson was at his greatest on the goal line.
You say Riggins was a great goal line runner. Marcus Allen, great goal line runner. Harry Carson was like that on defense. He had the greatest goal line instincts that I've ever seen.
The guy that gets left out in that Giants group is Carl Banks.
He was the quintessential strong side linebacker.
If you wanted to run strong side against Carl Banks, forget about it. He was as good outside linebacker against the run, I think, as the league has ever seen.
Against Denver in Super Bowl 21, New York's big 3 linebackers made 3 successive big plays to turn the game.
It's first and goal to go from the 1.
Great players make plays. Taylor made one.
Lawrence Taylor was there.
Carson was in on one.
Wilhite stopped in his tracks.
Banks made another one.
Banks, Carson, the linebacker, stopped him.
And then they missed the field goal. I told them at the half, I said, we got a good chance to beat the Broncos.
New York dumped Denver and drowned the Big Tuna.
Here comes Harry Carson now.
Parcells is up there without the headset, and they get it.
Starting a celebration that's still in use today.
You had mobility, you had speed, you had size. They were big, they were tough. Harry could handle the middle, Carl handled the strong side.
Back inside the
Lawrence was the most dominant single force. They were the best.
Coming up, the curtain comes down on one surprising contender.
Not afraid, are you?
Nothing cements greatness for a linebacking corps quite like winning a championship. But despite a perfect season in 1972, Nick Bonaconte is the only linebacker we can name from the no-name defense. The Cowboys' Chuck Howley and Leroy Jordan combined for 11 Pro Bowls and a championship ring.
Brady fires, touchdown!
The Patriots claimed 3 rings in 4 years behind a strong linebacking corps, but no team dominated a decade quite like our number 2.
The number 2 linebacking corps of all time, the Steelers of the 70s.
The Pittsburgh Steelers had the greatest defense over a period of time I've ever seen.
Starting in 1974, the Steel Curtain defense led Pittsburgh to 4 Super Bowl wins in 6 seasons.
I think almost every starter but 1 or 2 on that team was a Pro Bowler.
But I think the most important part of that defense was the linebacking corps. I think they were the heart and soul of it.
Our number 2 linebacking corps of Jack Ham, Jack Lambert, and Andy Russell was together for the first 2 Super Bowls. Russell was a 7-time Pro Bowler who had been with the team over a decade before Lambert even arrived.
Andy was this wily all-pro.
Andy, let's get one.
Who always seemed to make plays and made very few mistakes.
I mean, you talk about a guy that can think on his feet. That guy there, he was probably doing stock calculations in between plays.
Russell's approach differed dramatically from the fiery Kent State product who would come to symbolize the Steel City.
Jack Lambert was the single most intimidating force in football.
That'll cool your ass off.
And maybe the single most intimidating force in the history of football.
He epitomized the intensity the fans felt.
Interference! Oh, you fool!
With the no front teeth and just his Clint Eastwood ways.
What you've seen of Jack Lambert,
Holy mackerel!
what you've heard about his reputation is all true.
But the ferocity that made Lambert both feared and fabled wasn't a complete picture.
His image as being this rock'em sock'em kind of guy had little to do with why he was so successful. The guy was just a very smart, very technically proficient player who could anticipate what was going to happen. He was simply so gifted at showing up the middle.
The guy that seems to get the most publicity is Jack Lambert. I thought he was a fine football player. But Jack Ham and Andy Russell were great football players.
Picked up by the Steelers, the 30, the 40. He's going to go for a Steeler touchdown.
And I think Jack Ham was the best outside linebacker that I ever played against.
In the 60s and the 70s, Jack Ham was the best linebacker I ever saw. Bar none. Middle or outside, Jack Ham was the best.
And it is intercepted. There's an interception by Jack Ham.
A lot of people say LT was better than him. I disagree. LT was just a pass rusher. Jack Ham played the game of football. He tackled. He intercepted. He was great in coverage. He was great on the pass rush. There was nothing he couldn't do.
Go ahead, take it.
In Pittsburgh's defense, the linebackers didn't target the passer. They covered the passer's targets.
The strength we had was assisting the defensive backs in the passing game.
We didn't come off the field. You know, when it was third and down and or obvious passing situations, we were out there playing.
And it is intercepted, picked up at the 25.
Jack Ham and Andy Russell and myself all played in the 220 range, and we had to be able to run.
We could play defenses that other teams just couldn't even think about playing.
Pittsburgh's backers combined for 25 Pro Bowls and played their best in the biggest games.
I played him in the Super Bowl in New Orleans. And the week before, they had played the Oakland Raiders before that, and I think the Oakland Raiders had gained 21 yards rushing. And I said, I'll tell you one thing, we'll rush for more than 21 yards against the Steelers. You know how many yards we rushed for in the Super Bowl? 17. 17 yards against the Steelers defense.
There's never been a better threesome. There's never been guys who interlocked together, whose talents complemented each other. I don't think any linebacking core in history even compares to those guys.
But success can be a double-edged sword. The Steelers fielded 9 Hall of Famers and sent an annual parade of defensive players to the Pro Bowl.
They were protected well by Joe Green and Dwight White, L.C. Greenwood. That's a pretty good defensive line for those linebackers to be playing with.
It's all about Super Bowls. They won a lot of Super Bowls. And when you win a lot of Super Bowls, you get a lot of notoriety.
Coming up, why we picked a team that never won a Super Bowl as our #1 all-time linebacking core.
I mean, how can you even say they're any good?
Recapping our top 10 linebacking cores of all time. Number 10, the Ravens and their telltale heart take flight in 2000.
We got to set this team up.
Number 9, Denver delivers an orange crush.
It's a special group in the National Football League history.
Number 8, the silver and black leave everyone black and blue. Number 7, Pittsburgh turns into Blitzburg. Number 6, Nitschke turns Green Bay into Titletown.
He stuck turning his hitting machine.
Number 5, the monsters of the Midway are reborn.
Those 3 guys took no prisoners.
Number 4, the Chiefs see the top with Mr. Contact.
We was unbelievable awesome.
Number 3, an army of one lands in the Big Apple.
Here goes down.
Number 2, the steel curtain dominates a decade.
I don't think any linebacking core in history even compares to those guys.
The number 1 linebacking core of all time, Jim Morris Saints.
The crew that I liked the most, I happened to play against, was the New Orleans Saints.
Ordinarily, when you have a linebacker core, you have 1, 2, maybe if you're really lucky, 3 that were as dominant as they were, but they had 4.
New Orleans Dome Patrol featured Ricky Jackson, Sam Mills, Vaughn Johnson, and Pat Swilling. Each reached at least 4 Pro Bowls, and in 1992, our #1 linebacking core was the only core to ever send 4 backers in the same year.
Well, that had never happened before. But if you watched that defense play and you watched those guys play, I mean, every one of them deserved it.
Hey, new quarterback game, baby. It's worst nightmare.
When teams had to prepare to go into that dome, they were scared to death of that linebacker core.
I hated playing against the Saints. Their defense was very violent. I mean, the Giants had great linebackers, but the Saints linebackers, I thought, was by far the best linebacker group in the NFL.
The outside linebackers are your pass rushers. So you get Ricky Jackson, who had incredible strength, and you had Pat Swilling, who had incredible speed and quickness coming off the edge. They were a great group.
Ricky Jackson was a 14-year veteran and the team's original tough guy.
If I was ever in a situation where I needed to defend myself, and I could pick one guy that I've ever coached, it would be Ricky Jackson.
You know, no knee pads, no thigh pads.
He's just a raw football player. Ricky was very underrated.
Ball came loose. Saints have it.
In 1987, the Saints provided Jackson with a complimentary yellow jacket. Georgia Tech's Pat Swilling.
Pat Swilling was your classic up-the-field pass rushing outside linebacker.
Yeah, we're going to be on top of Marino today, too.
When the ball was snapped, I mean, he was so explosive coming off that edge. You put him on that artificial turf.
He's hit by Swilling. Fumbles the ball. It's picked up by the Saints. Will score.
Swilling was around guys and on the quarterback in a lot of cases before the tackle ever moved.
Come on, let's tighten it up. Stop this drive, huh?
Inside linebacker Sam Mills stood just 5'9", but played like a giant.
Sam Mills looked like Tattoo. I kept looking around for Mr. Rourke, thought I was on Fantasy Island.
He was short, but he was not small. And he would get up under guys and just rock them.
Sam Mills was an absolute genius, student of the game. He ran the show. I remember a game, Sam called every single play we were running. Watch it, Joker! Swing! Lead draw. I got it, baby, I got it.
Sam Mills was the best football player I ever coached because he was everything that you wanted in a player.
Going to be bad. Intercepted.
Work ethic, leadership, preparation. He achieved as close to his potential as any player that I've ever been around or coached.
Third down has the ball taken out of his hands by Sam Mills. He'll score.
That's an awesome play.
Like Mills, Vaughn Johnson went from USFL cast-off to NFL All-Pro.
If you lined up those four guys and you'd say which guy most looks like an NFL linebacker, it would be Vaughn Johnson.
He was just a maniac. I mean, this guy was a physical football player.
That was a guy that came out of the USFL that no one knew about. That it took about 3 plays. Roger Craig is arguably the best all-around running back in the NFL at this time. And about the 3rd play of the game, he goes, man, I don't know who that dude is, but I don't want you to let him hit me anymore today. He says, that guy hurts.
I can't believe when people bring up the New Orleans group. I mean, to me, they're just another bunch of curtain jerkers. To compare them to the Steeler linebackers is ridiculous. Refresh my memory. Did they ever play in a playoff game?
Actually, they did.
DeYoung, he lateraled
3 times.
It's a touchdown.
And lost all of them.
I mean, how can you even say they're any good?
The fact that they never won a playoff game had nothing to do with them.
And running in for a touchdown is Eric Allen.
They didn't have the Chiefs' defensive line, Pittsburgh Steelers' defensive lines. They really had to make plays, and people got on them pretty quick.
The Saints are the only team on our list not to appear in a Super Bowl. So why all the love? For the Saints' first 20 years in New Orleans, the sky was always falling.
This is the dangest thing I've ever seen in a football game right here.
But after 20 years without a winning season, the Saints never had a losing season in the 6 years our #1 linebacking core was together.
He stopped short of the goal line. The Saints are winners for the first time in 21 years.
They combined for 13 trips to the Pro Bowl, but only once in those 6 years did another Saint defender accompany them.
It's not about size, and it's not about speed. It's about how you execute, how you fit in, how those puzzle pieces fit into a whole. And they did. I think that they executed about as good as any linebacking crew that I've ever seen or played against.
I'd certainly vote for him to be the #1 linebacking core of all time. I mean, I know this team never won a playoff game, but I mean, they were good enough for us to win a Super Bowl.
They're going to be a real factor this year in the playoffs. They could be the Super Bowl team.
If they had an offense, they would have won 2 or 3 Super Bowls in the 80s.
Though Pittsburgh, Kansas City, New York, and Chicago all have strong cases for #1, they also have much stronger supporting casts. And we think it's time for the Saints to finally win something.
And the Saints have done the unthinkable, the nearly impossible.
They may not have gotten their Super Bowl, but they do now have a title. The Saints are our #1 linebacking core of all time.